Welcome to WGVU Public Media's Decision 2020. In this online forum, we introduce you to the Michigan Supreme Court Justice candidates. This is an opportunity for voters to hear directly from the judicial candidates. We're recording these interviews via Zoom from the studios of the Meijer Public Broadcast Center at Grand Valley State University. Today's recording is in association with the Grand Rapids Bar Association. It generated the 5 questions we'll be asking the candidates. Joining us now is incumbent Chief Justice Bridget Mary McCormack from Ann Arbor. Bridget, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a privilege to get to discuss with you the nonpartisan section of the ballot where people have important choices to make. And it's been an honor to serve on the court for the last 8 years. Perhaps especially during the last year when we've seen more change in the state courts than in the last 3 decades. It is a disruptive time, but I believe we will come through it with courts that are more transparent, more accessible, and more efficient for the public.
Could you please tell us why you feel you should be reelected to the Michigan Supreme Court?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I hope voters will reelect me to the court because they will find that I have served honorably for the last 8 years. It has been a privilege to be part of the court's decision-making process with my excellent colleagues, and I look forward to continuing that. But in addition, it's been really a privilege to be part of the court's administrative oversight work, and I've spent a lot of time on that, especially since I have been the Chief Justice for the last almost 2 years now. And I am a known quantity. You can see all of my decisions as well as the administrative court work the court has been doing since I have been serving on it, and it has been my privilege.
The Michigan Supreme Court is responsible for the general administrative supervision of all courts in Michigan. Where do you see our courts in need of improvement, and how would you address that?
Yeah, thank you for this question, Patrick. I think it is so important right now. The courts have really seen more change in the last 7 months than in many, many decades. And all of it is ultimately for the better. It has been a lot of disruption to figure out how to keep the public safe and to continue to make sure that everybody has access to justice. Access to justice is as important as ever in an emergency. But courthouses are busy public places. So figuring out how to keep the public safe and keep the virtual doors to the courthouses open has been a lot of work, but it is work that will leave our courts better able to serve the public going forward. So Michigan has been leading the nation in moving its court processes to remote platforms. We surpassed more than 1.2 million Zoom hours in our trial courts a couple of weeks ago. And we are the very first state in the country to unveil statewide online dispute resolution, which is now available to anybody. They can participate from their smartphone or their laptop. It's asynchronous, so they can do it whenever it's convenient for them, and it is free. All of this is really increasing the way the courts can efficiently serve the public, and also at the same time, giving us an opportunity to increase access to justice in a way we've been working on for a long time and never finding quite the same breakthrough. And the confluence of those two things, the ability to solve an access to justice crisis and make the court's business more efficient, makes it a pretty exciting time and important work.
The killings of George Floyd and other minorities and the seemingly disparate treatment of persons of color in our system of justice raise the question of whether justice is truly blind. How do you propose to fortify the public's trust in the judiciary?
This is such an important question, Patrick, because all that courts have, the only currency courts have is public confidence. You know, we don't have any money, we don't have any army. We have to rely on the confidence of the public to enforce the rule of law. So it's a really important national conversation we're having about the fairness of the criminal justice system and race in the criminal justice system. I have co-chaired the governor's task force on jail and pretrial incarceration together with the lieutenant governor over the last 18 months. It's a bipartisan task force that came to 18 consensus recommendations, which would make Michigan a national leader in front-end criminal justice reform. And when we went through the process of collecting statewide data to try and understand what was driving our jail populations, it became clear that there were all kinds of inequities that show up in the data. Among the recommendations, the last one, in fact, number 18, was that criminal justice data be collected across agencies and be made available to policymakers and to the public so that we can all better understand how our criminal justice system is operating. Transparency is really important to public confidence, and good data is really important to transparency. If the jail task force recommendations make it through the legislature, and so far it looks pretty good, and we get to collect excellent data, that will help us a great deal with growing public confidence.
The State Joint Task Force on Jail and Pretrial Incarceration reported in January of this year that crime in Michigan is at a 50-year low, and yet the number of people incarcerated in county jails has tripled since the 1970s. That same study showed that black men made up 29% of jail admissions, while making up only 6% of the state's population. What role do you see Michigan courts playing in criminal justice reform?
Yeah, thank you for this question. It has been my honor to serve as that task force's one of its two co-chairs, together with the lieutenant governor. And the work we did was the latest example of how criminal justice reform in Michigan is both bipartisan and nonpartisan. The Jail and Pretrial Task Force was the result of a joint agreement between myself, the governor, and the leaders in the legislature, the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader, together with the Michigan Association of Sheriffs and the Michigan Association of Counties. We had bipartisan representation on it, as well as every stakeholder group represented on the task force, including a district court judge and a circuit court judge. Complex problems require multi-stakeholders to engage in problem solving. There's no other way to do it. And the courts are an important stakeholder in figuring out criminal justice reform. So the judges who served on the task force itself, and then the many other judges who served in an advisory role to the task force, were critical to coming to consensus recommendations. And frankly, judges have testified in the legislative hearings on the legislation that reflects the task force recommendations. And their testimony has been extremely important to the legislature in understanding how the changes will work. So I think the court has an important role to play, and we're playing it.
Michigan's trial courts are overwhelmed with cases and parties representing themselves because they cannot afford counsel. And there is a perception held by many that justice favors the wealthy. As the saying goes, justice delayed is justice denied. What would you do as a justice on the Supreme Court to address these issues?
This is also a really important issue, Patrick, and I appreciate your asking about it. The civil justice gap is something that leaders in the law have been talking about for a generation, longer, I suppose. In Michigan, 8 out of 10 people have civil justice needs, civil legal needs, and cannot afford lawyers. And what that means is they either try and navigate courts on their own, and that's complicated because we speak this other language in courts that we learn in specialized school, or they don't even try. A lot of people just assume they won't be able to navigate courts on their own, so they never even try. And that's a problem because it does undermine that public confidence that we talked about. So the court announced a year ago, April, the Justice for All Task Force, which is a partnership with the State Bar and Michigan Legal Help, which is our awesome self-represented litigant website, with the ambitious goal of closing the civil justice gap and reaching 100% access to the civil justice system within 3 years. That is not going to mean that there's going to be a lawyer for everybody, but it could mean that there are lots of other ways we can make sure people have the resources and the help that they need to make sure that they can fully get their point across when they have a civil justice problem. There are lots of creative ideas that the task force is working on. They're currently meeting with stakeholders this month, and then we'll be making some recommendations for the court on how to proceed. And I hope we will achieve our ambitious goal in the timeline we set out for ourselves.
Incumbent Chief Justice Bridget Mary McCormack, thank you for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
From all of us here at WGVU Public Media, we thank you for logging on, and please get out and vote Tuesday, November 3rd.